I have been living in the UK for almost 2 years now, and I still remember the exact moment my British friend looked me dead in the eye after a Sunday roast and asked if I wanted some spotted dick. I was literally shocked. I thought it was a terrible, highly inappropriate joke. But then a steaming bowl of sponge covered in bright yellow sauce arrived at the table, and it completely shattered everything I thought I knew about food. We need to talk about this. In the US, we would never name a dessert something that sounds like a medical emergency. American desserts are designed to look perfect and sound appetizing. We want the pristine New York cheesecake, the flawless buttercream frosting, the Instagram-ready donut. British desserts are ugly. They look like absolute mistakes. They are brown, they are lumpy, and they have names that sound like insults from the 1800s. But there is a deep psychological reason for this. The weather here is miserable for 8 months of the year. You do not survive a damp, grey, freezing British winter with a light, airy French macaron. You survive it with a dessert that sits in your stomach like a warm brick and makes you feel like you are wrapped in a duvet. British desserts are not about aesthetics. They are about survival and heavy, unapologetic comfort. And once you get past the terrifying names and the weird ingredients, they are actually 10 times better than the sugar bombs we eat back home. Number 10. Banoffee pie. When I first heard someone offer me banoffee pie, I thought they were making up words. It sounds like a cartoon character, but it is actually a massive structural achievement. It is a biscuit base, filled with sliced bananas, a mountain of thick toffee, and topped with whipped cream. Now, Americans should automatically love this because it is essentially a graham cracker crust, which we invented. But the British use crushed digestive biscuits mixed with melted butter, which gives it this slightly salty, savoury edge that perfectly acts through the sugar. The history of this one is actually pretty recent. It was invented in East Sussex in the 1970s by a restaurant owner who was trying to fix an unreliable American recipe for Blum's coffee toffee pie. He swapped out the coffee for bananas, mashed the words banana and toffee together, and accidentally created a national obsession. The first bite is confusing because the toffee is intensely rich, but the bananas cool it down instantly. In the US, we would never put bananas and toffee together without adding chocolate or peanut butter, but the Brits showed extreme restraint here, and it works perfectly. Number 9. Knickerbocker Glory. You go to a seaside town in Cornwall, the wind is aggressively blowing your hair into your mouth, and someone offers you a Knickerbocker Glory. In the US, knickers are pants. If you say you are wearing knickers, you mean golf pants. In the UK, knickers are women's underwear. Eating an underwear glory sounds like an actual crime. But a Knickerbocker Glory has nothing to do with laundry. It is a towering, chaotic ice cream sundae served in a massive tall glass. It usually has layers of vanilla ice cream, strawberry syrup, fruit, whipped cream, and a cherry on top. It dates back to the 1920s and was considered the ultimate luxury treat because it required a special long spoon just to reach the bottom. The reason Americans think it is weird is entirely because of the name, but once you take a bite, it is just pure nostalgic joy. It tastes like being a kid on a summer holiday before the internet existed. Number 8. Eton mess. In the US, if a baker drops a cake on the floor, they throw it away. In Britain, they scrape it into a bowl and name it after their most elite, ridiculously expensive boarding school. Eton mess is literally smashed up meringue, whipped cream, and fresh strawberries, mixed together in what looks like a culinary disaster. The urban legend says that a pristine strawberry pavlova was dropped by a dog during an Eton versus Harrow cricket match in the 1920s, and the students just scooped it up and served it smashed anyway. Whether that is true or not, the psychology behind it is brilliant. Americans spend hours piping frosting to make things look perfect. The Brits understand that the stomach does not care what it looks like. When you take the first bite, the crunch of the baked meringue dissolving into the heavy whipped cream mixed with the sharp acidity of the strawberries is unbelievable. It is light, it is chaotic, and it requires zero baking skills to make. Number 7. Treacle tart. This is where the cultural divide gets very real. You ask what is in a treacle tart, and a British person casually tells you it is golden syrup and breadcrumbs. Breadcrumbs. In a pie. To an American, putting breadcrumbs inside a pastry crust sounds like a Great Depression survival recipe. We put fruit or chocolate in our pies, not old bread. But you have to understand British golden syrup. It is not like American corn syrup. Golden syrup was invented by a Scottish businessman named Abram Lyle in 1881, and the tin still features the original logo, which is literally a dead lion surrounded by bees. I am not making that up. Golden syrup has this rich, buttery, almost toasted caramel flavor. When you mix it with fresh breadcrumbs and lemon juice and bake it in a short crust pastry, the breadcrumbs absorb the syrup and turn into this chewy, sticky, dense filling that holds its shape perfectly. Harry Potter mentions treacle tart constantly in the books, and for a year I thought it was a magical made-up food. Then I bought a slice at a bakery in London, took one bite and realized why a wizard with access to literally any food in the world chose old bread mixed with syrup as his favorite dessert. Number 6. Jam roly-poly. This dessert looks like a bleeding arm when you slice it. It is a flat sheet of suet pudding, smothered in strawberry or raspberry jam, rolled up like a Swiss roll and steamed. Now, I mentioned the word suet. Here is the truth about British desserts. You cannot understand them until you understand suet. Suet is the raw, hard fat found around the kidneys of a cow or a sheep. When I found out I was eating cow kidney fat in my dessert, I nearly booked a flight back to New York. In the US, we bake with butter or shortening. Using beef fat for a sweet jam roll sounds completely insane. But British baking uses suet for a very specific scientific reason. Suet has a much higher melting point than butter. When you steam a suet pudding, the dough sets before the fat completely melts, which leaves behind these incredible little air pockets. It makes the sponge unbelievably light, but simultaneously dense and filling. You slice this jam-soaked roll, drown it in hot custard, and suddenly the beef fat thing does not matter anymore. It tastes like absolute childhood comfort. Also, this is exactly the kind of thing I go much deeper on with the people who support this channel directly. So if you are sitting there thinking, okay, I need the fuller version of this story, join the membership below. That is where I share the deeper thoughts, the more personal side of all this, and the extra bits I cannot always fit into the main videos. Number 5, trifle. Every American knows exactly one thing about British trifle, and it is the episode of Friends where Rachel accidentally puts a layer of beef and peas inside it. So when someone offers you a trifle at a British Christmas party, your brain immediately panics. You expect it to taste like a shepherd's pie mixed with jam. Even without the meat, the concept is weird to us. Real trifle is a layer of sponge cake soaked in sherry wine, topped with fruit jelly, topped with a thick layer of custard, and finished with whipped cream. Americans do not do wet cake. We like our cake dry and fluffy. Soaking a sponge in booze and then covering it in wet jelly feels like you ruined a perfectly good cake. But the British trifle is a structural engineering masterpiece. The sherry cuts through the sweetness of the jelly, the sponge absorbs all the flavors, and the custard acts as a rich, creamy barrier before you hit the whipped cream. It is cold, it is heavy, and after one bite you realize Rachel Green completely robbed Americans of appreciating a culinary triumph. Number 4, Christmas pudding. Let me be very clear, this is not pudding. In America, pudding is a smooth chocolate or vanilla paste that comes in a little plastic cup that you give a toddler in their lunchbox. In Britain, pudding is a dense, black, heavy ball of dried fruits, spices, and suet. Yes, more beef fat. But the weirdest part is the ritual. British families make this dessert months in advance, wrap it up, and hide it in a dark cupboard. Every few weeks they take it out and pour brandy over it. They call it feeding the pudding. They are literally raising a dessert like a pet. Then, on Christmas Day, they turn the lights off, pour more alcohol on the pudding, and set it on fire. They bring a flaming ball of drunken fruit and beef fat to the dinner table. As an American, watching a family casually ignite their dessert is terrifying. But when the flames die down and you take a bite, the alcohol has caramelized all the sugars in the dried fruit. It is intensely rich, dark, and warm. You only need 2 bites to feel completely satisfied, which is completely opposite to American desserts, where you eat a massive slice and still want more. Number 3, sticky toffee pudding. When you hear sticky toffee, you picture a hard caramel apple or something that will immediately rip your fillings out. You also assume it is made mostly of toffee. It is not. The secret ingredient inside the sponge of a sticky toffee pudding is dates. Blended up, unrecognizable dates. If someone told me I was about to eat a date sponge cake, I would respectfully decline. But blending the dates into the batter does something magical. It makes the sponge incredibly moist and gives it a deep, almost molasses-like flavor without tasting like fruit. Then they punch holes in the hot sponge and pour a boiling hot toffee sauce over the top so it seeps all the way through, and serve it with either vanilla ice cream or a massive puddle of hot custard. It is aggressively sweet, heavy, and absolute perfection. It was apparently invented in the 1970s in the Lake District, and it is the one British dessert I will actively fight people over. Once an American tries this, they never look at a standard chocolate cake the same way again. Quick thing before we get to the worst two on this list. The data on this channel shows that over 80% of you watching right now are not subscribed. That means you are showing up for the content, but the algorithm has no reason to show you the next video. Hit subscribe so you do not miss the next one. And while you are down there, hype up this video in the comments and hit the like button to show some love. It seriously helps me out so much. Number 2. Mince pies. This is the ultimate British deception. You walk into a coffee shop in December and they have these beautiful little star-topped pastry tarts. You ask what they are and the barista says mince pies. Every American brain immediately translates the word mince to mince meat, ground beef. You think they are offering you a savory meat pie dusted in powdered sugar for dessert? I avoided these for an entire year because I refused to eat a beef pastry with my morning coffee. But here is the historical context that explains the confusion. In the Middle Ages, these actually did contain real meat. People used sugar, spices, and dried fruit to preserve actual minced mutton or beef for the winter. Over the centuries, as preserving techniques got better, they dropped the meat entirely. Today, the mincemeat inside the pie is strictly vegetarian. It is a sticky, spiced mixture of raisins, sultanas, currants, candied peel, spices, and vegetable suet. The pastry is buttery and crumbly, and the filling tastes exactly like Christmas. It is essentially a heavily spiced mini fruit pie, but because they kept the medieval name, Americans remain absolutely terrified of them. Once someone forces you to take a bite, you end up buying them in boxes of 6 and eating them in your car. Number 1. Spotted Dick. We have arrived at the final boss of British desserts. There is no escaping the name. It sounds vulgar. It sounds alarming. And as an American, ordering it in a public restaurant feels like you are violating a social code. The name actually has a very innocent, boring Victorian origin. The word spotted just refers to the dried currants and raisins mixed into the dough, which look like little dark spots. The word dick was just a common 19th century dialect word for pudding or dough, likely derived from the word dough or thick. That is it, just spotted dough. But try explaining that to an American tourist reading a pub menu. The dessert itself is a cylindrical suet sponge pudding. It is steamed for hours, turned out onto a plate, sliced, and absolutely drowned in hot custard. The British obsession with pouring hot custard over heavy sponge cakes is something we do not have in the US, and it is a tragedy. British custard is not thick American pudding. It is a silky hot pourable vanilla sauce. The sponge itself is fairly plain, slightly sweetened, with bursts of tartness from the currants. But when the hot custard soaks into the suet sponge, it transforms into this incredible, warming, melt-in-your-mouth texture. It is the culinary equivalent of sitting next to a fireplace while it rains outside. I came to the UK expecting to survive on imported peanut butter cups and chocolate chip cookies. I judged these desserts entirely by their terrible names and their messy presentation, but I was looking at it all wrong. American desserts are built for a sugar rush. British desserts are built for comfort, survival, and warmth. They do not care if the presentation looks like a train wreck because the mechanics of the flavour are completely flawless.